Welcome to the Back on Track podcast. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who the hell are you? Well, things are a little bit different this episode, and let me explain why. My name is Alfie Draper. I've been friends with Sam, the creator of this podcast, for many years now, and even featured on Back on Track at the very beginning. Since the podcast began, Sam has given us, the listeners, the opportunity to hear some incredible stories from people that have faced real adversity in their lives. In turn, he has provided many of us with a safe space to talk about our own mental health issues. Well, today it's his turn. Mr. Back on Track himself has allowed us to hear his story. Sam developed negative behavioural patterns during the early stages of his education. These patterns followed him all the way through to secondary school and beyond, eventually leading to a complete mental collapse, leaving him feeling worthless and struggling to find any purpose to his life. I'm really pleased to say that Sam eventually seeked help, and he's here today to give us an insight into why he dedicates all of his time into creating awareness surrounding all mental health issues. So without further ado, let's hear his story, from start to finish.
And I was like, what the fuck? Like, went into this room and it's like chairs either side, a raised part where you got the judge, the prosecution and your defense, and the police officers that arrested me were there on the other side of the room, and there's a mic in the middle, and I thought, this is way too heavy. What started to happen was I was anxious 100% of the time, to the point where it was just painful in my mind. And then obviously I was drinking to forget that anxiety, which created more, and it was just an absolute fucking mess. And it gets to the point where you become depressed as a result of it. Yeah, and then at that point you just think, if this is life, I just don't want to carry on with it, really. And I mean, like, I'm not talking, I thought about it every now and then. I'm talking from the second I woke up to the second I went to bed. It was all I would think about. I just thought, I wish I was dead, essentially. So one night, I got obviously pretty smashed, and I just thought to myself, I fucking had enough now. I've just had enough. That is it. And obviously, when you're pissed, you've got that confidence to actually go through with it. So I thought I'll get as much as I sort of can of that, and just basically do them all in my room, and I hope I don't wake up, basically was the reality of it.
Hello, mate.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right, mate. I'm doing all right. It's it's really weird to be on the other side of the mic, so to speak.
So my first question was this.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
How does it feel? It feels weird. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, and also a bit daunting as well. Do you know what I mean? Because we're not here to talk about what we have for breakfast. Do you know what I mean? We're here to talk about, some of the most intimate moments of my life story. And, but it's an important thing to do, and guests do it every week on the podcast. So it'd be kind of weird, first of all, if I wasn't going to do it. And also I think, it's an important thing to do because hopefully, why I do the podcast and all the rest of it will make a lot more sense probably after this. I mean, it's kind of inferred anyway, that I've been through my own things, and but yeah. So that's the long answer. The short answer is it feels weird, but at the same time, nervous but excited. Yeah,
makes two of us, mate. So don't worry.
Yeah. How are you feeling in the interview role?
Surreal, weird, nervous, obviously. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this. Yeah. So hopefully I can deliver a decent enough podcast for you to air, mate. Otherwise, you're going to have to find somebody else. Because
mate, you're the only person available. You're the right man for the job. I believe in you, mate.
All right, man. Right, so to get this cracking, I suppose, Westy, and obviously, we've been friends for quite a while now, and I suppose we should actually mention this.
It's relevant
to the listeners, maybe, that me and Westy have known each other for a long time. So this conversation is, it's nice to have with a friend as well. In some instances, that's not the case, and people seek all different forms of help and therapy. But so to have this conversation with you I feel quite honoured and privileged to be part of it. Yeah. To be honest with you, first and foremost, and for you to invite me in order to conduct it. So,
well, mate, it was a no-brainer for me because obviously I had you on the podcast back in the day, and I say back in the day, it was last year, but it feels like ages ago. It does. And it just, mate, I don't know, it felt right, and like obviously we've been mates for a long time, and also as we found out when I was kind of explaining things to you before the podcast, there's so much synergy so much crossover between our two stories. So yeah, it was a no-brainer, and mate, it's a privilege to have you doing it, man. So feelings mutual.
Thank you. So in true back on track fashion, I suppose, I kind of want to start this interview by just sort of letting you tell us where it began, really. So where your story starts. Go, man.
Yeah. Happy to rewind. I mean, I've been doing a lot of retrospective thinking over the last sort of 6 months, partly because I've been going through therapy, obviously, and anyone that's done that knows a large part of it is that kind of retrospective thinking and trying to identify myself where it all went wrong, really. Do you know what I mean? And I guess it goes back to probably starting at like 10, 11, 12 years old, that sort of age, because I was basically incapable in school of, you know, sitting still in a lesson, being quiet, not taking the piss and all the rest of it. It was just who I was. I could not sit there in silence. I always had to try and make people laugh and try and give myself a rush of adrenaline by misbehaving. You know, the most common word on my report card was disruptive, you know, so it was that kind of thing. And, you know, looking back now, I think there was a bit of a void there in me, if that makes sense. From a really young age, the need to provide myself with some sort of, you know, feeling of being alive, that buzz, that adrenaline that I got from pissing around, essentially. And obviously then later on in life, I substituted, you know, that buzz that I got from pissing around to then drinking and recreational drugs and all the rest of it. So that's kind of where it all began. And I mean, I got kicked out of this that school I was in, which would have been my first secondary school. Is it secondary school when you're like 10, 11, 12? 11,
Probably. I think 11 is moving into secondary school, sort of that transition. Yeah,
so I was the political way that they put it was I was asked to leave, basically. I was asked to leave, and it was a private school. That's probably important to note. And in these private schools, you know, parents have a lot of clout, and I think there were, you know, groups of them that weren't happy with me being there and all the rest of it, you know, for whatever reason. And so yeah, I remember the sort of final meeting that I had with my headmaster and my parents and all the rest of it. And the headmaster, in true private school fashion, said, "Sam, you are persona non grata," which in Latin means unwanted person. And I mean, you know, first of all, kind of a heavy thing to say to like a 11 or 12-year-old.
Sorry to interrupt. How did that make you feel as an 11-year-old child at the time?
Do you know what, mate? It all felt so surreal. Like, because, you know, all the time when you're messing around and you're doing stuff or whatever, you never think it's going to come to that. You never think it's going to come to actually you're being kicked out of school. You know, it's really embarrassing for your parents, all the rest of it. And so, like, first of all, it was a bit of shock. And also, I guess I didn't realize at the time what it did to me, but it definitely did mark me, you know, that comment and the fashion in which the whole thing happened. And probably had, you know, knock-on effects later on in life in terms of self-worth and all the rest of it. But also, as we'll get on to, it was also a huge motivator for me. Do you know what I mean? To not want to prove these people right and to want to, you know, overachieve so that nobody could say, you know, that I kind of failed getting kicked out. And also, you know, trying to pay the parents back for all of the embarrassment that caused them. So yeah, it was mixed, man. Like negative things as well as positive things it brought me.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of that you could deem as part of growing up, right? So your behaviour in the school, but you have sort of nodded towards the fact that there was a void, right?
Yeah.
So did you realise that at the time? When now, as you said, now you're processing your life as such as a story. At the time, did you think that there was an early onset maybe of mental issues at that time in your life?
Honestly, not at all. Not at all. I thought everything was wrong with the world rather than it being with me, right? I remember, so after being kicked out of that school, I went to another school and, you know, after getting another detention, another letter home or whatever, I think my dad was taking me home and he said to me, he was like, I think he just reached the end of his tether, you know, and he was like, "Sam," he's like, "I just don't understand. Why can't you stop doing this?" And I think I also came to the end of my tether trying to explain it. And I just said, I remember what I said. I said, "I'm sorry, I just find normal life too boring. Normal life is too boring for me. I can't sit there and just get on with things as people do. I have to try and, you know, make it more interesting for myself." But again, no, to answer your question, I didn't think there was anything strange about that, really. It was just, it felt normal at the time. But obviously, you know, as you get older, it stops being, well, it continues being pissing around in the classroom, but then it also turns to other substances which give you that same buzz or filling that void. So no, looking back, I had no idea that was what was going on.
Okay. So then you've, as you've just briefly mentioned, you've moved on and that transition into secondary school. So at what age did you begin to be involved in alcohol? Why, first of all? I know it's very easy to say that, you know, others around you are doing it, and that again is part of growing up. But were you easily led as a child? Were you, or as an adolescent? And at what age did drugs come into the mix as well?
I think, I'm not sure if it was about being easily led, but I think there definitely was an element, 100%, of, you know, trying to be popular, trying to be cool, rebelling, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know, the first time I got pissed, I was probably, it was on a family holiday, you know, in Greece, like slipped off and you know, got some drink in the town or whatever, and realised, God, that, you know, that's a bit of a buzz, that, like, I really enjoyed that. But when it became, you know, more regular, I'd say it was probably, I don't know, I guess probably 14, something like that. And, you know, recreational drugs weren't in the picture at that stage, not that early. But yeah, drinking at about 14, you know, weekend stuff, as kids do, right? But, you know, I think there was some early signs there that it wasn't going to go that well for me, you know, because I would regularly end up the most pissed or whatever and just didn't handle it well because I guess I enjoyed the feeling so much, that escapism, that filling of that void and all the rest of it. So yeah, man, it probably started around 14.
Well, that was one thing I was actually going to kind of move on to was it the enjoyment factor or was it the escapism that came with the drink? Because I suppose at that point in life, that's the first time that a kind of external substance, should we say, was affecting how you were thinking, how you were feeling. So without you even knowing it, do you think that escapism led to quite excessive drinking?
I think it was both, man, to be totally honest with you. And I think probably it's still true, you know, sometimes now in my life, even when I'm older, and I think it's true for a lot of people. Part of the reason people drink is for escapism, and part of it is simply because the feeling is nice, right? And so I think it was both of those things. But and as I say, you know, all those years ago, I didn't realize I was trying to fill a void by doing it, you know. But then, you know, from the age of 14 and 15, 16 or whatever, it then became pretty much, you know, the only thing I was looking forward to at the weekends. Do you know what I mean? And so to have that kind of escape, that level of escapism, you know, at a young age is probably not normal. So yeah, there was definitely a hole there that I was trying to fill, and yeah, it became more problematic as the years went on, really.
Okay. So you sort of dabbled on the idea that you were sort of drinking excessively. You were getting too pissed. You were that guy that was the clown, should we say? You know, and there'll be a number of people listening to this that can probably relate to being that person that gets too drunk too often, probably. But did you feel in control? Did you feel in control of your, let's say intake at this point? And is there an element of drug taking that you did that you felt made you sort of more stable in a sense? Yeah.
So, I mean, to answer the first part of the question, was I in control of my drinking back at the age of 14, 15, 16? No chance. You know, no, you don't even understand the need to control it back then. Do you know what I mean? It's just a question of getting as pissed as you can and enjoying it as much as you can. And you only learn later in life that you do need to sort of moderate it. But yeah. And so, God, mate, sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. But I think, yeah, drugs came into the picture probably at the age of 16, you know, maybe a bit earlier. Probably tried weed at like 15 or something, but, you know, sort of harder recreational drugs, ecstasy, cocaine, pills, you know, things like that, probably came into the picture when I was 16. And they weren't regular occurrences at that age, like, of course not, but they were happening every now and then, you know, every once in a while on the weekends. And there absolutely was an element instantly where I was like, wow, I can take this substance, feel almost totally in control of my actions, not having the blackout, not having the, being a bit of a fool or whatever. And yet I'm still getting a great buzz, So again, that realization kind of laid fertile ground for there to be problems later on. But so yeah, certainly part of the attraction for doing recreational drugs was I feel like I can moderate this a lot better, which might sound strange to some people.
No, completely. So you're sort of moving into secondary school at this point. Did you have any aspirations? So did you know where you were going to go? Did you know what you wanted to do at this point? Was that, were you academic at this point? Were you, did you like education, or were you still misbehaving at school? Were you still not fully focused, let's say?
So the whole thing of misbehaving was a theme right throughout school, right up until I left secondary school at the age of 18. Do you know what I mean? Or sixth form. That stayed as a constant the whole time, In terms of did I have any aspirations? No. And I feel like that was the problem. Yeah. Again, playing back into that idea of having a void that you need to fill. If you have no aspirations in life, then, I always wanted to do well. I wanted to be successful, but I had no concrete aspirations. And I guess that was a problem. But to answer the part about, was I academic? And this was almost part of the problem. I was really academic. I think to some people's annoyance at times, because I wouldn't pay attention. I'd piss around the whole time, smash it at the weekends or whatever, but I don't think I ever failed, anything throughout school. I'd always pass and get A's and, do you know what I mean? Sometimes be top of the class and all the rest of it. So, but that was a problem, because what that meant is I kind of felt that I could get away with sort of behaving like this. And yeah, that was a theme right throughout until I was, at university even, so yeah, I was academic, but I guess I didn't know where I wanted to channel that into, I knew I had some intelligence and ability there, but yeah, no concrete aspirations, which I guess looking back was probably an issue. But then again, it's probably common for a lot of people that age. How many 16-year-olds do you know that know what they want to do with their lives?
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many. Yeah. I know I certainly didn't either, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So tell me more. So you're at secondary school.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you kind of, I suppose, was there a point where you thought maybe your mental health was in danger, or your mental illness was getting worse, or obviously you haven't been diagnosed with anything at this point?
Yeah. So,
but are there any triggers, would you say, that led to maybe you questioning whether you weren't right?
Not at all. Again, not at that age. Mental health, mental illness wasn't even talked about as far as I can remember back at school. You had no idea. And also, so then getting into 16, 17 or whatever, the recreational drug stuff gets a little bit more serious. You're doing, sessions, the sesh, as people will know, i.e., doing ecstasy or whatever, not going to sleep and carrying on the next day. Now, again, that wasn't every weekend, but it happened, right? And the problem is you see people getting away with it. You see people getting away with it. It's not having any visible negative effects on them. And when you start doing it, you're not really noticing any negative effects either. So there was no sort of, warning sign to make me stop, really. And yeah, and also I think it's relevant to say that between the ages of 16 to 18, that was kind of my career in smoking weed as well. It lasted a couple of years and I stopped. But I think, probably another relevant thing to add here is, which I suppose is a key event in my life story, and that was my mum getting cancer at the age of when I was 16. And I mean, anyone that knows me will know, how important she is to me. She's my idol. I adore her, and so and also I'd lived in a bit of a bubble until that point. I come from a middle class family. Had a nice upbringing, all the rest of it. And so when that happened at the age of 16, it kind of burst that bubble. Do you know what I mean? It kind of made me realize, fuck, there are things that can just happen out of nowhere that can turn your world upside down. And that's where I first sort of learned to start suppressing emotions, which, as I'm sure you'll know, is a really negative thing to start doing. But I was almost in denial about it being a reality. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I suppressed it so deep. And also looking back now, during that 16 to 18, period, I can't remember anything.
Yeah.
I cannot remember anything nearly. So the detail is going to be a bit shaky. But so she first got it in her kidney, and she had her kidney taken out, and then probably a year later or something. So when I was then 17, 18, she got it in her bladder. So it had come back again and in a more serious place. People can have kidneys out, no issue, but bladder's a bit more of a serious thing, right? And so she had to have that out, and there's a lot of chemo, and it was just a sad time, man.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was just a sad time. And also I realize as I'm saying this, I'm extremely fortunate because she survived. I'm extremely fortunate. I get that. And I know that's not the case for a lot of other people, and so part of me almost feels bad in a way, like that affected me when people have been through worse, if you understand what I'm saying.
You can't look at it like that though, Sam. Like, I mean, at that age, to comprehend, that age of 16, 17, 18 is probably the hardest age, I think, when you're entering adulthood for an event like that to take place. Because as you just described, you haven't been exposed to the horribleness of life, really. That most people haven't anyway. But the horrible things that can happen. So to comprehend it at that age is a really, really tough thing to do. And I actually don't think there's later on in life, and you learn that these things can happen, it becomes slightly easier, maybe.
Yeah.
But as I said, at that stage, it's really, really hard, and there's no way you should ever feel or should have felt guilty, although at the time you were. No, you were. You can't help how you were feeling. But I mean, did you understand the severity of it?
So this is kind of another interesting thing, and I don't know, my mum and dad will probably listen to this and might disagree with it, but I think there was probably an element of them not conveying all of it always to me and my brother. Perhaps they did. My brother, he was 2 years older than me, so I think there was probably an element of them trying to sort of protect us mentally, emotionally, but it was obviously incredibly serious, and that thought at the age of 16, 17, 18, whatever, that your mum might die frags with your mind, right? Frags with your mind massively, and it fragged with mine. That's kind of why weed is relevant during this period, because anybody that's, had periods of smoking or whatever knows it, you get tunnel vision. You're not really aware of what's going on around you. It numbs your emotions and all the rest of it. And so that kind of came into the picture. But again, we're not talking every day, even still, because throughout all of this, as I said before, I always was motivated to never fail, never let things go too far, kind of thing. So all of these behaviors were kind of weekend things, and during the week I'd keep on it. But even still, smoking it a couple of nights at the weekend, it just helped with that suppression of these emotions. And yeah, like I said, I was massively in denial about how much it was affecting me. I mean, I told you, when I got pulled out of my sixth form common room, so I would have been 17, 18, by my head of sixth form, and she was like, "Sam, can I talk to you?" And I thought, fuck's sake, like what's this going to be about now? And obviously turned out one of my parents, or I don't know, both of them, had rung up the school and just let them know what was going on, basically, I guess, to, in case I was acting out and all the rest of it. I mean, I've been doing that the whole time anyway, so there wouldn't have been much change. But she just said, I've heard what's happened, just want to make sure you're all right, all the rest of it. And I was like, I'm fine. Like, I'm absolutely fine. Like, thanks, but all good. You know what I mean? Like, it was that was how I was, I'm sure I probably did cry on a couple of occasions, but it was so suppressed that almost it wasn't real. Do you know what I mean? And that's why, looking back now in terms of the memory of it all, it's hazy as hell, man, just because I wasn't allowing myself to feel or remember or take things in back then, because I just wanted to numb myself as much as possible. But then obviously, that again leads into, other stuff and all the rest of it. So, it was a challenging time, man. It was a challenging time for sure.
Of course. And just on a kind of side note, I suppose, did you feel at the time you had the support at school, did you feel as if you had support at school, or was it very much a conversation that they felt as if they had to have with you? Because this is something that, I like to discuss with people, and, this is your story, but it's relevant because this whole topic of mental illness stems from people suffering from it from a very early age. I remember being at school, not having that support, and not really seeing a system in place at all. And I don't know whether that's changed now. I don't know whether that's a thing that has been combated, that students, especially at the time, have the help that they need. Yeah,
mate. So certainly, I mean, tackling the sort of mental health, mental illness part of it first, like, I can't remember any talk of it at school. I might be wrong. Maybe I just don't remember. But in terms of what was going on with me, I mean, they only found out when one of my parents, I guess, called them. And, I guess the head of sixth form did her job in calling me in, but I guess she could only go off what I said, and if I was probably quite convincing in the way that I said I was fine, right? And no, there was no follow-up. I mean, who knows? Maybe she told other teachers and stuff to be like mindful of it and all the rest of it. But no, there were no sort of, special measures or anything else. But I guess that's normal,
Yeah.
But mate, I had support in abundance from friends, family, all the rest of it. They were all incredible about it, and I guess kind of kept me together, through that time. So yeah, I guess I didn't need it in school because I had it in abundance in other places, which I was fortunate to have, because not everybody has that. So
cool. Thankfully, your mum, made it through, and she's happy and healthy now, and she's still with us, and that's something that's going to live with you for the rest of your life. That experience that you had with her being ill, but she managed to get through it, and
yeah, thank God, man. Yeah,
thank God. Mums and mums, they're amazing. So life should be celebrated even at the worst times. So
yeah, no, I'm massively fortunate, man. Massively fortunate, massively thankful. Because there were obviously a lot of times when I didn't know if that was going to be the case, right? And so yeah, and it makes you, I don't know, I guess it makes you want to enjoy that connection with them even more later on in life. You know what I mean? Because you feel so thankful to have it. But to be honest, even still, it's probably not something that I do enough. Like just spend quality time with one or both of my parents. Alone. But yeah, so thank God that all went all right. But yeah, it was a strange time, those years up until like 18. Yeah.
So at this point, you're 18 years old. You're off to university.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Portsmouth.
Yeah.
Down in Pompey.
That's the ticket, mate. Yeah. Yeah. Pompey.
And how were you at this point? So I'm assuming that, did you treat this as a fresh start? So you've had a bit of a torrid last couple of years, behavioural issues at school, which have been, throughout your whole life anyway, your mum being ill. Did you go down there with a kind of fresh mindset? Were you ready to just be a student? Were you excited about learning? And so tell me more about your university experience and.
Yeah, I think that's, it's a good thing to ask, kind of, what kind of headspace I was in there. And so it was a mix because on the one hand, I was massively excited. It was a fresh start, and you hear so much about uni, and obviously, it fitted with my kind of things that I like doing, right? So I thought, yeah, this is going to be amazing. But, it wasn't perfect in terms of my mental state then, because one thing that I didn't really mention, which I should have mentioned as we were talking sort of about that period, is because occasionally I was getting too pissed or whatever, or making a fool of myself. What starts to happen is obviously, you get a bit of a reputation for that. You've done, like, people point out concrete things or whatever, and it starts to assassinate your self-worth, or more correctly, I was assassinating my own character and my own self-worth. So it wasn't like I went down there totally feeling like it was a fresh start, because that stuff stays with you. It becomes part of your identity, if you know what I mean. But yeah, back then, so when I went to uni was where it all changed mentally. I'd say before that, I wouldn't really say there was, sort of mental illness going on. I think it came in later, but yeah, I was really happy to be going down there. I thought it was going to be amazing. Went down there in my first year, and that was great. I mean, obviously, you know, you smash it pretty hard in your first year, and you've only got a pass, right? You don't need to. Your first year marks don't count towards your final
40%.
Yeah, you just need 40%.
Hit the 40%. You're groovy, man. You're in next year. Yeah,
exactly. And that's basically exactly what I did in that first year. I obviously partied really hard, and but things were okay, and I passed that year. I did the bare minimum, but I think, you know, one thing that massively helped me is I met a girl in that first year, who was also on my course, and we were together for 2 years. So basically the first year and the second year. And I think looking back now, I always say that, like, subconsciously, so without me realizing, and probably without her realizing, or maybe she did, I don't know, she was kind of the glue that kept me together. Because at this point my mind was starting to frag a bit. I told you some of the things that were starting to happen in terms of like anxiety and paranoia. You know, like I would be walking in Tesco and somebody would come around the corner of the aisle and I would literally jump out of my shoes. You know, like they would see me visibly jump and be like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? And I was thinking, what the fuck is wrong with me? That is not normal. And you know, that expression of being scared of your own shadow. I'd be walking home from uni and I'd see my shadow on the like pavement in front of me, and I'd stop and I'd be like, fucking hell, do you know what I mean?
Completely irrational.
Yeah, completely irrational. Yeah. And more things, like I told you, you know, about you throw a fag butt in a bin, and then I'd be thinking the whole night after that started a fire, whatever, you know, I'd hand something in at uni in paper form, which is a 20-minute walk away from my house. I'd come home, so 40 minutes there and back. And then I'd be like, no, I haven't handed that all in. There was a bit of paper that probably fell out or something. And I'd go all the way back and re-hand it in. Yeah. And at one point, a lecturer was like, Sam, what are you doing? Like, that's, you know, it's all fine. So these cracks were starting to show. But because I was with someone who was a straight arrow and, you know, didn't tolerate drug use and you know, wasn't a huge drinker and all the rest of it, I kind of got away with it almost. So I was all right during those years. Drug use wasn't massive. I still binge drank 3 times a week, but you do it at uni. Do you know what I mean?
There's justification to it.
Yeah.
So you can drink. That's the one thing about uni that, you know, that more and more people are conversing about now is that it's not healthy.
No. But
there's a justification for excessive drinking and drug taking because everyone else around you is doing it.
Exactly.
You've met, just to step back just slightly, Sam. So
sure.
You know, you going into uni, these, let's call it paranoia. This was happening. And I need to bring up the conversation between, and I'm certainly not perfect.
Yeah.
But I've never been a smoker.
Yeah.
Never smoked weed excessively, right? Yeah. Tried it. But there's always a correlation. There's always a relationship between weed and paranoia that I read about, that I talk about. Did you solely put this kind of paranoia as such, or your anxiety that you were feeling down to weed? And was that a kind of catalyst for you to cut back and stop smoking?
Mate, 100%. So I got to uni, and, you know, I'd always been this massively confident person, loved speaking in public and all the rest of it. And I was finding that I'd put my hand up and go bright red and start shaking and think, what the fuck was going on? Combined with all of these other things that I mentioned. And I started to notice when I was getting stoned that I felt like something was fragging in my mind when I was really stoned. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like you can feel pieces juggling around that shouldn't be moved. And just one day I totally stopped. I totally stopped smoking. I went from, you know, smoking it quite often at uni to you could pass a joint in front of me and I'd be like, get that out of my face, because I hated what I felt it had done to me. Now there'll be a few, you know, people that still like smoking it, listen to this podcast, and they'll say, what about all of the other stuff, you know, that you were doing? And yeah, fair point. I'm sure that also, you know, laid fertile ground for these problems that were coming. But I think it was in large part down to weed. And I also kind of know it is because, you know, since then I've never been a regular smoker of it at all. And since then, the kind of paranoia side of things has kind of gone away. Obviously the anxiety and all the other bits are massively there, but the paranoia kind of went when I stopped smoking it. Hung around for a little bit, but yeah, I did put it down for that, and almost in a way that made it kind of easier to deal with, because I thought, I'm only feeling like this because of the weed. If I stop smoking it, I'll be absolutely fine, right? And so yeah, in answer to your question, I certainly did put it down to that, and that kind of made it easier to to compartmentalize in a way.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going into third year now. How are you feeling? I mean, you just mentioned that you're in a relationship, which certainly helped. Did that? Is this going well at this point? Academically, are you thriving? You mentioned earlier about being able to wing it. I have a name for you guys, and I call you the Immortals. I know a few Immortals, right? Yeah. The guys that could just get away with it.
Yeah,
and obviously just have that capacity to be able to perform, whether that's under an examination or coursework. Just very, very intelligent people that could go and get absolutely trolleyed and still achieve, very, very good results.
Yeah.
So you were an immortal.
Mate, it sounds like a Marvel superhero. So I love that. I love that expression for it. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is I was. Going back to what I said about it being that way in school, that was the problem, was that I could get away with it. I could get absolutely hammered at the weekend, and then. But like I said, I always drew clear boundaries most of the time. I would never get absolutely hammered before an exam or a few days before it. I would always make sure that I was in a decent headspace to be able to do coursework and all the rest of it. However, did I go into third year in a good headspace? The answer is no, massively no, because that relationship I was in broke down between my second and third year. And it was kind of, it was my first serious relationship, right? And I think anybody listening will be able to relate to it. When you were 19, first serious relationship, and it's the first time somebody's broken up with you, it just frags with your mind.
It's devastating.
It's devastating. It's hard to process. First time in your life, someone's gone, we've had all this, and I
don't want you.
I don't want you.
I actually don't want you.
I actually don't want to be with you. Yeah, I'm not interested. And mate, I was devastated, because I was madly in love with the girl at the time. And obviously I mentioned earlier about that relationship being the glue that held me together. So I started third year single, and obviously, Freshers Week was there. I was doing Freshers Week as a third year, but drink. And that's where we talked about drinking for escapism earlier, but that's where drinking to forget really, came in. I would smash, a half of vodka or whatever, and then go out and I was just getting absolutely hammered regularly certainly in the first month. And things started to fall massively out of favor mentally. And that's where anxiety got massively out of control, because the thing is, when I was younger, I used to have occasionally blackout nights where you get blackout pissed, and I just didn't care. I was like, I'm like fine or whatever. But something happened where just, from that point, if I got blackout drunk, I would prang out about it I used to have like a rule, which was basically I would be anxious about any one night for like a month, basically, if I couldn't remember what had happened. And then if a month had passed, I'd assume it would be all right. But the problem is, when you're getting blackout drunk 3 times a week or twice a week, where that anxiety then is perpetual, it never ends. And also, then it's just having a massive effect on your mental well-being anyway. So I had a massive, massive, massive wobbly, basically, but still was managing to complete everything on time, and nothing was wrong with my coursework and all the rest of it. I was just being a bit of a mess, really. And that was a theme throughout my third year, and it got me into definitely one of the darkest places I've ever been in my life so quickly. We're talking, a few months or whatever after starting my third year of uni, I was chronically suicidal. And I think it's important I'll probably explain how I got to that, because it might seem like a bit of a jump to someone to say, having anxiety. And it wasn't just anxiety about getting blackout drunk. It was just anxiety then started to become who I am. I mentioned those little things earlier, and it just crept into all areas of my life. And what started to happen was I was anxious 100% of the time, to the point where it was just painful in my mind. And then obviously I was drinking to forget that anxiety, which created more. And it was just an absolute fucking mess. And it gets to the point where you become depressed as a result of it, because you're constantly anxious and you think, what is wrong with me? And then at that point you just think, if this is life, I just don't want to carry on with it, really. And I mean, like, I'm not talking, I thought about it every now and then. I'm talking from the second I woke up to the second I went to bed, it was all I would think about. I just thought, I wish I was dead, essentially. And there'll be people listening to this that will go, stop getting, if you weren't getting hammered 3 times a week, you probably wouldn't have felt like that. Well, yeah, of course. But it's not that easy, is it? First of all, I was 19 years old. Second of all, I was going through at the time what was a painful experience, which was that, that breakup. And then also I was doing it to medicate all of the other mental health issues that were appearing. And yeah, man, I used to lie in bed at night and just be like, I literally hope to God I get some kind of incurable disease tomorrow, which I would have been so pleased about that. That is how bad it got, the way I described it a few years later to one of my best mates, I didn't describe it to anyone really in this much detail at the time, but the way I described it is because I'd like to be able to sit here and say that I got through that because of some internal resilience that I have, but maybe in a little part, but really it was just because the idea of actually going through with it was just terrifying. It was really scary. And so, yeah, the way I used to describe it to one of my best mates a couple of years later was, I remember one night I was just going to bed in my room at uni and I turned out the light and I got into bed. And just that like action of turning out the light, I thought, if it was that easy, if I had the option now to end my life by just pressing that button, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat, I would have done it. And also then you're feeling massively depressed about the fact that you're feeling like this, that you're having these thoughts because you're having a normal conversation with someone in your class or whatever, and you're just thinking, I want to die. Yeah. And you're talking about coursework or something.
This is the craziest thing. And there's going to be so many people listening to this that can relate. And, it's mad. But how alone you are and how tiring it is. And it's torrid, and mate, thank God, that you didn't, and you can call it whatever you want, that, you can describe it and you can explain in whatever way you think is right, why you didn't. And thank God that you didn't, but it's so tiring, and mental health is tiring.
Yeah.
Mental health is so upsetting and tiring and torrid because it's never ending. And the way you've just described it, and just going back briefly to the way that when you said you'd rather be diagnosed with an incurable disease, like that's something I can relate to. I know that's something that any mental health sufferer out there can relate to, because you've got a name, you've got something to go on. A doctor can say to you, you've got this because your body, there's something wrong with your body, right? And we can diagnose that and we can try and treat it. When it's up there, you are clueless.
You are clueless.
You're clueless, and no matter what you're going through, nobody can truly understand what you're going through. So you can have these conversations with people, but no one will truly know what you're going through. So it is a very, very lonely place. And I kind of want to, because we've discussed this outside of this podcast as well.
Yeah.
And that conversation about suicide. And I don't think it happens enough. I think there's been a huge progression with regards to conversations about mental health, right? But I don't think there is about suicide. And I don't know whether that's because it's so morbid.
I think it is that. It's the mere sort of, for someone who's never suffered from mental illness, the idea that you could want to kill yourself, to end your own life and be so determined, I think is hard to comprehend. But that's part of the problem, as you kind of alluding to. Part of the problem is when you feel like that. I mean, first of all, I was at uni at the time. I mean, I can count on, a couple of fingers the amount of times I went to the doctors at uni. And so, first of all, I had no idea really what was going on with me. I didn't know that I should have reached out for therapy or medication. I didn't know that I should have cut back on the bad behaviours that I was doing. And I did feel massively alone. I thought, what the fuck has gone wrong with my mind? Literally, What has gone wrong? A bomb has gone off in my head and I just don't want to be here anymore. And you do feel alone because you kind of know what you're thinking is so drastic.
Wrong.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, you feel it is wrong.
I don't think humans were ever made to want to kill themselves.
No.
That thought in itself is very weird. You know, how a human, you know, we can put on, you know, be born into this life and want to end it. That's just mad. And another thing, you've alluded to it occasionally. Did you struggle to even comprehend where you were at and comparing yourself to the old you? So, you know, you have gone from being a very sociable person, somebody that was very, you know, active and sociable, and you are now in a very, very dark hole and you cannot relate to anything that you used to be. Yeah. Did you struggle with that? Massively,
because, you know, to use that analogy I just used, it felt like a grenade had gone off in my brain and everything was totally shattered. The kind of happy-go-lucky stuff that was there before was nowhere to be seen. And yeah, I did think, how can I be here when, you know, a couple of years ago stuff was going on, but I never thought about killing myself back then, you know? And that was extremely difficult to deal with. And also, you know, I think at times I probably wasn't a good person to be around. Do you know what I mean? And that was difficult for me as well, because I think before that I had been fun and nice to be around, but then, you know, your behaviours become so negative and so toxic in a way that starts to play on your mind as well. But yeah, that was a massive part of the problem, because then you feel like there's no way back now. I'm so far gone. My mind is broken. I'm in total despair. I'm an absolute mess, and I'm thinking daily about killing myself. You know, what went wrong? And you don't know what you're supposed to do back then. Yeah. You just don't know. No.
There's a brilliant Stephen Fry quote, actually, who described depression as being at the bottom of a hole with no light. And you're like, no light. Just imagine, like, apps, just a bottomless pit, an endless pit, and there's just no escape whatsoever. So to have that during your final year at uni must have been pretty shit. I mean, you're looking towards, this is meant to be one of the best times of your life. This is what you've been working up towards through school. You hear these amazing stories of university where you're going to make the greatest friends, you know, friends that you'll never forget, friends that you'll hang around with for the rest of your life. Come the end of uni, again, you've pulled this out of the bag academically, I'm assuming, because you're an immortal.
Yeah.
So you've bagged a degree.
Yeah.
So you get first.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's kind of mad really that all of this stuff was going on, but I still tried to not let it affect my academic achievement. And I think going back to what that headmaster said to me when I was a
persona
kid,
non grata.
Yeah, persona non grata. You learned some new Latin words today. But going back to that, man, and also I knew it was only going to make me feel worse if I let things go to shit academically. I guess I thought that was then really the point of no return. If I'd really fucked that year up and thrown it all down the drain, I don't know what would have happened. And also in a weird way, going to the library and getting work done or whatever and having some kind of routine, something to work towards, kind of kept me afloat really. Another thing that kept me afloat massively was that I joined the uni boxing club in the last year, and that got me madly into physical exercise, and obviously you're releasing aggression, all of these emotions in you. It gave me a positive outlet to channel that. So there were things keeping me afloat, and yeah, in a weird way, uni work was keeping me afloat as well. And it went really well. Like I graduated with a first class degree. On
the surface, it went really well.
On the surface, It went really well. Yeah, specifically in relation to academics, in relation to how I was feeling, horrific, obviously, as I've detailed. But in terms of the academic side of things, it went really well. I got a first. I won an award for the best special investigation, which is like a journalism dissertation on the course and all the rest of it. So yeah, it went really well in that sense. But I mean, I remember listening, you know this song, I think I told you this before, Oasis, Half the World Away.
Yeah. Man.
Anyone can listen to that song. Like, I used to listen to that song in my room, like on quite a few evenings. You know, this what it says about I would like to leave this city, this whole town don't smell too pretty. You know, I could feel the warning signs running around my mind. Yeah. I used to listen to that all the time because I just felt that way so much. I could not wait to get out of there. I could not wait. It was hell, and like you're saying, and that made it worse because it was like, as you said, it was supposed to be the best year of my life, and it was the worst year of my life where everything went wrong. But yeah, so came out with that degree.
You studied journalism, right?
Journalism, mate. Yeah.
I suppose I want to ask, did you subconsciously, I think, looking at where we are now, man, you've set up this podcast, which is journalism.
Yeah.
That's what it is. There was obviously a passion there.
Yeah.
For this and journalism as a whole. Did that subconsciously carry you through, even though you might not have been aware of it? And you might have just been banging out these essays because you could and doing these exams because you could, because you knew you were good at them. But did you realise at the time that this was something that you loved? Or were you too, like, and mate, I've got to say hats off for getting through that, because I know there's a lot of people out there that probably experience mental health issues during this period at university because of the pressure of university. For getting through it.
Yeah, cheers, man. Yeah.
And for getting a first.
Yeah.
And for getting best final project, man. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, cheers.
Going
man.
through what you were going through. But journalism as a passion, was that a thing?
So I think I decided fairly early on that I was going to go into PR because, we had a PR woman come into uni and do a presentation. And one of the first slides was, you average salary 50 grand or whatever for PR. And I kind of identified early that the glass ceiling in terms of what I could earn and therefore the life that I could afford myself through journalism was going to be pretty low. But I was doing also a few projects on the side in my final year of uni. I was doing some ghostwriting for a couple of Olympic athletes that I met through my uni work, and I was doing some PR stuff for a football app back at the time. So what kept me going, it wasn't so much a distinct passion for journalism. It was I need to make something of my life. I feel like I can be good at something. So yeah, subconsciously, that probably was one of the things that kept me going and kept me from actually going through with, wanting to kill myself, essentially, was thinking that there could be something, there could be something there. So yeah, not a passion as such for journalism, but thinking there could be something better for sure. Yeah.
Cool. And you briefly mentioned boxing. Obviously, we're both boxing fans. What did it do for you? Because firstly, were you physically kind of active before this at all? Because I've known you for a long time, right? Yeah. And we've had conversations about boxing. I actually didn't know that you boxed yourself or trained at least. Was this the first kind of sort of entrance into the world of exercise?
Not really.
Don't mean that to offend you.
I wasn't just like, no. Do you know what? I started going to the gym a bit when I was 16 or whatever, and I always liked sport. Always liked sport. I played cricket to quite a high standard, and tried to get into school teams.
You mean Mersham?
I played for Mersham. Played at district level actually.
Well,
so
didn't know that.
So no, sport was kind of always there, but this was the first time, and it was really important because it was the first time that I realised, first of all, that it was a lifeline for me. And it still is now. If I don't exercise, I feel horrendous. And all of these, feelings start kind of coming back. And so doing boxing, which obviously a really intense form of exercise, and I got really quite fit. I never got to the point of having a bout, basically, because how can you when you've got these behaviours that are going on as well? Still getting hammered, and it was just never going to happen. Yeah. But it did teach me that exercise had the power of making me feel better. I remember, going on a half an hour run or whatever. And for the half an hour I was running, I wasn't thinking about anything else apart from one foot in front of the other. Similarly, in the boxing gym, I wasn't thinking about anything else other than the training I was doing. And when you're stuck in your mind to that extent, the overthinking, the anxiety, the depressive thoughts, wanting to kill yourself, to not have those thoughts for half an hour if it's running, or 2 hours perhaps if you're in the boxing gym, it's like gold dust. It's literally like gold dust. And so, yeah, that was certainly massive in keeping me afloat during that time.
Nice. And probably came at a good time. I mean, you've had a torrid time, but discovering that maybe in your final year where things really, really went south and dark, and then discovering the boxing.
Yeah, it came, yeah, as I say, it was literally a lifeline. It was literally what kept me alive, along with what we mentioned about, the sort of faint hope that I could make something of myself, and that maybe a change of scenery, a geographical change, I thought was gonna fix everything. So yeah, that was the next card that I tried to play.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you've graduated, obviously, with first class honours. Couple of middle fingers up to the old teachers that said, that you weren't going to make anything of yourself.
Man, that was actually a massive. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm getting so lost in what I'm saying, but it massively was. It was a massive, a middle finger up to all of those people from back then. And also it was paying my parents back, because they got to come to like an award ceremony, which only award winners went to, and all the rest of it. And so that was that kind of coming full circle, me kind of paying back. They're probably listening to this thinking you can never pay it back, little shit. But for all of those years of being a little shit, but yeah, it certainly went some way towards me feeling better about that whole situation. Yeah,
cool. And what was your next move?
So my next move was I decided, in true escapism fashion, that I would feel a whole lot better if I moved to another country, basically. And this was when TEFL, I was hearing TEFL all over the place.
There was a lot of talk of TEFL at uni, wasn't there?
There was loads.
Lots of TEFL talk. I had a lot of TEFL talk. Yeah. It cropped up in many lectures and visits and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, probably because it's at a time where people are thinking, fuck, this is ending. What am I going to do? And obviously traveling is a common thing that you do when you finish uni. And sorry, for anyone who doesn't know, TEFL is teaching English as a foreign language. It's a qualification that you do, and it allows you to teach English in, non-English speaking countries all around the world. And I thought to myself, I don't want to go into a real job straight away. I love Spain, and so I thought I'd go over there. That would solve all the problems. And I went over there, and I had a one-way ticket, a one-way flight. I studied a TEFL course when I got there, an in-person one, of a month. And in the beginning, that change of scenery and everything else, and getting out of the place that I associated so much pain and suffering with, did help a bit. It did help a bit. And yeah, I ended up staying there stayed in the south of Spain, in Malaga, for 2 years, working as an English teacher. Met lifelong friends there, learned Spanish to fluency, which is the thing that I'm most proud of in my life, much more than, my uni degree and all the rest of it. And they were better than my final year of uni, those 2 years. But when I say better, all it meant was I wasn't thinking every second about killing myself. Depressive thoughts were still there. Anxiety was still there. These toxic behaviors of binge drinking were still there. And I got myself nicked shortly after moving there. Because, it was alleged that I, was drunk in public, and there was a disagreement, between parties, to put it like that. And police came, and again, they alleged that I, was resisting arrest and all the rest of it, and everything else. And so I found myself waking up in a very dark, a dark prison cell in Malaga, and thought, what the fuck has gone on here? Basically, this is, next level kind of stuff. And eventually, was let out, but it was a traumatic experience in there, to say the least. And all that did was then fueled this anxiety. First of all, anytime I saw, any sign of authority, out on the street or whatever, I would absolutely shit myself, and think, God, is there going to be some repercussion from that or whatever else? In the end, I had to go to court. I was released on bail, went to court, and proper, like, I was expecting it to be like a magistrate's court, the equivalent here in the UK.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't.
No.
It just wasn't. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, went into this room, and it's like chairs either side, a raised part where you got the judge, the prosecution and your defense, and the police officers that arrested me were there on the other side of the room, and there's a mic in the middle, and I thought this is way too heavy.
How fluent in Spanish are you at this point?
Well,
did that help you out?
No. So this is the thing. This happened after I'd been there for 3 months. I'd been there for 3 months, so I didn't speak effectively. I spoke a few words, but nowhere near enough to understand the situation. I mean, I had a translator sat next to me in court, and anyway, in the end, I was, I guess found not guilty, and it was just thrown out. For rightly so in my opinion. So that was done and dusted in the eyes of the official stuff. I'd done nothing wrong, and that was the end of it. But it was just a sort of a traumatic moment that fragged with my mind even more. So then I had mad anxiety around being there. And it's a wonder I stayed so long really after it happened, because I never felt fully comfortable after that. But I guess that just shows how shit the previous place and experience was, because it was still better than that.
Yeah.
It was still better than that. And as I say, I did make some really meaningful connections there. And so kind of kept me going. But so yeah, Spain was a better period.
Yeah.
Certainly wasn't suicidal every day, which was a big change. But after a couple of years, I had to come back, or in my eyes, I had to come back and get a real job and start my career. And obviously, from there it went, sort of further downhill again.
Yeah. So Spain actually sounds like a stimulated environment for you, where you could see, let's say, an improvement from third year of uni.
Massively. It was a massive improvement, but still, the fact that I got myself arrested and all the rest of it.
That's traumatic.
It's traumatic. And it's also a sign that my behaviour was out of control, which is kind of why I mentioned it. And, there were other instances that were not ideal, nothing of that level. But that's what I mean. The toxic behaviour was still there. I was still running away from my own thoughts. But as I say, it was better than wanting to kill yourself daily. So
sunny Spain. Where to next? Back home?
It was back home, mate. It was back home because I thought, I don't know, it's just, you're brought up to believe that you need to get a good career, a good job and all the rest of it. And so I thought, I've done 2 years here. I need to get back and get on with a career in PR or digital marketing or whatever it might be. And so I moved back to London and moved into a house share with 3 other guys. And this turned out to be probably on a par, if not worse than my third year of uni. I think I came back and I didn't feel like I slotted in. I was working 2 jobs side by side. One was 3 days a week and one was 2 days a week. One for a boxing charity, which I loved and was fulfilling, and one for a digital marketing company, which, was a cool company and I enjoyed parts of it. But I definitely, even with these 2 jobs, and there were aspects of them that were good, I just started to feel lost again, as that void started to be there. That anxiety was there. And I was going out every weekend, as is kind of the way in London, and getting absolutely hammered. And also, this is kind of where taking coke came into the picture in a bit more of a big way. It got to the point where it was probably, most weekends it would happen. Yeah. And I would justify that to myself by saying, it's not every day, I'm not addicted to it. It's fine. And you see people getting away with it. So you think it's fine. But, so in between those benders and getting blackout drunk and all the rest of it, I was just in this cycle of living for the weekend coming, doing incredibly toxic, and it's effectively self-harm in a way. Yeah. What I was doing.
That's
effectively self-harm.
It's a coping mechanism and a very, very unhealthy coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And, and you alluded to this earlier when people were listening, like, well, why'd you do it?
Yeah. Because
it's self-harm. It's a form of self-harm. It's a release. It's during those 2 days, that Friday night when you finish work, it's a release. And the things that you're doing to yourself and the drug taking and the alcohol, there is a release for you. And it's time where you're actually not depressed.
Exactly.
Of course, it gets worse, but you're not depressed, and that's why people carry on. Do you know what I mean? That's why people do it. Carry on, Sam.
No, mate. And, thanks for highlighting that again, because, of course, there will be people listening thinking, we'll just cut that out. You know what I mean? But you got to understand that, in my eyes, that was one of the only things I had that stopped making me feel like shit, that stopped making me feel depressed, stopped making me feel anxious, stopped making me feel as if I had a huge hole inside of me and nothing really to live for. Just getting, self-medicating it at the weekend. And things got out of control. Things got out of control. And I wanted to relay this, what I feel is quite an important message, to anybody else that does dabble in recreational drugs. And even if it's not once a week, once every 2 weeks, or whatever it might be, like, just be careful with it. Just be careful with it, because, it certainly didn't help that I was doing it from a younger age. But if it starts to get more regular, like once a week or whatever, it has a massively, massively detrimental effect on your mental health. And you will not get away with it for long. You will not get away with it for long. And I didn't get away with it for long. And it kind of culminated in, becoming hugely depressed again, becoming stuck in a perpetual state of anxiety again, having that huge hole inside me. And also, I also dabbled in Xanax during this time, which are, for anyone that doesn't know, sleeping pills. Wasn't taking them regularly, but sometimes to help you go to sleep after you've had a bit of a bender, they served that purpose for me. But what I did know about them was also that they were very dangerous, really dangerous if you took too many of them. And so one night I got obviously pretty smashed, and I just thought to myself, I fucking had enough now. I've just had enough. That is it. And obviously when you're pissed, you've got that confidence to actually go through with it. So I thought I'll get, as much as I sort of can of that, and just basically do them all in my room, and I hope I don't wake up, basically was the reality of it. But I guess a weird thing happened in that I called, the guy that I would get them off, and he didn't have any. Didn't have any that evening. And so, I ended up probably getting something else and carrying on with that evening, and woke up the next day in a hugely shit state. But that was the first time where I woke up and I thought, fuck me, what was going to happen last night if that had gone another way was going to be really heavy. And I realized at that point, this has gone too far. Do you know what I mean? That was a wake up for me, because I knew what I wanted to do, even though I was pissed, and I knew it would have happened if that hadn't been taken out of my control, essentially. And after that happened, I just thought, this is, it's time for a change.
Have you sought help? And I'm going to come back to that night shortly. At this point, have you sought any professional help from anybody? So
no, up until that point, no. So all of this stuff that I'd been going through for years mentally, no, I just dealt with it myself. I just thought, like, at some point, maybe it will get better. Maybe this is normal to some degree. Like, do I even want to be helped? But after this incident happened, I did see a therapist on the NHS in London, but I only went for one session, literally. So how old would I have been? I don't know, like 23 or something like that, I guess. And she said that she thought I had generalized anxiety disorder, which is basically characterized by always worrying about something. Basically, your mind cannot be free of worry. You'll always find something to prang about. And that's essentially what I'd been living with for years. And then I'd essentially been, medicating that with alcohol and other things and all the rest of it. So, but I only did one session. And obviously anyone that's done therapy knows that one session isn't enough to cement any changes. And so, again, my answer, rather than, actually look at myself and fix myself, my answer was change of scenery again. It was, would you believe, people are probably listening to this thinking, what the fuck is wrong with you? But I guess almost in a way that kind of shows just how fragged my mind was. Of course. Do you know what I mean? That inability to step back and go, what I actually need is a long course of therapy, probably to go sober for a bit, all the rest of it. I wasn't able to do that, and it's mental now looking back. And for anybody that can't understand that, why I chose to carry on doing the things I was doing and whatever else, well, they've probably never been there themselves, is all I can say. Of course. I think people should try and be compassionate towards people when they're going through these things, rather than try and point out the obvious, one therapy session, and then it was, on a flight again.
Okay. And first and foremost, mate, I speak for pretty much a lot of people when I say thank God that your dealer didn't pick up, or he didn't have what you were after that night, because you know you're a credit to the world, mate, and what you're doing now. And
thank you, bro.
I want to know how you felt. I understand that you were drunk and stuff the night before. When you woke, I know that you realised that something needed to happen, but what was that initial thought of waking up and going, wow, like, wow?
It was fear. It was fear. That was genuinely the first thing that I felt. For the first time, I felt fear for my own safety in a way, which is kind of weird, because when you're suicidal, the only thing you want to do is, is jeopardize your own safety, right? And I guess it's because it was so real, because I knew how close that was to happening. I woke up and I was scared. Genuinely, I was scared, thinking if something doesn't happen, this is all going to get out of control to a point where it's beyond repair. So it was fear, man. But I think I needed that fear. I needed that fear to put into context properly and understand just how dangerous everything was that I was doing and the mental state that I was in. I'm one of these people that needs the harsh, course cracks to change my behavior, basically. And I got that from that wake up. I thought, fuck, something has got to give here. Yeah.
And as you said, time to get away again.
Time to get away
time
again.
To, let's say run away.
Run away, it was.
In a sense, though, I mean, obviously, your story so far, there's, there was certainly some positives that came out of Spain. The first time you went, you despite it ending in not the best way, and you returning home, did you return there thinking, I actually had an all right time there, so let's go back and see if I'm okay there again? Was there a connection between Spain and better times?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that was why it was a no-brainer, because I thought in the last 4 years or whatever, the only place I haven't been chronically suicidal is Spain. And if I'm totally honest, mate, it was, obviously I'd had this wake up and there was fear involved and all the rest of it. And I wanted things to get better, but there was also an element of, I decided to go to Barcelona instead of Malaga, try somewhere new.
Yeah.
But there was an element of last chance saloon. Do you know what I mean? It really was last chance saloon. I thought to myself, I'm going to go away from this environment, which is clearly not healthy for me in London. And I only lasted there like 9 months, I think, not even a year. So, to give you an idea of how quickly that all happened and how quickly it got out of control. And I thought, I'll go to Barcelona. I was going to study a Spanish course for a little bit to brush up on that. And then I was going to do a master's in Spain, studying in English in public relations. Yeah. So I thought, go somewhere where I'd felt happier, try and further my career, try and get that feeling of, getting to something back, filling that void back, and see how that goes. But I was concretely made up in my mind that this was the last hand I was playing. Either that was going to be the solution and it was going to get better, or I was definitely going through with it this time. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing would have stopped me if that had gone
last
wrong.
Roll of the dice.
It genuinely was. It was last roll of the dice. And luckily I guess there were some pretty amazing things that happened there, which probably kept me alive, really. Let's
go into that. Let's go straight in. So I mean you've moved, is it a one-way ticket this time? No, because you were studying. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, I went to Barcelona and I studied in like a Spanish academy for like 2 months, and then my masters I had to do 1 term, so 3 months in Stirling in Scotland.
The contrast.
As fuck, yeah.
The contrast.
Literally. Yeah. And then the other 2 terms, so 6 months, Jan to June or July, whatever it was, were in Barcelona. So I was in Barcelona for 2 months, then Scotland for 3 months, then back to Barcelona. But the key thing that happened was after 2 weeks of being in Barcelona the first time when I was studying the Spanish course, I met, at that time, the girl that became my girlfriend, who was also a psychologist. I mean, you can imagine.
How fitting.
Yeah, you can imagine when I asked what she did before we'd even met, and she was like, I'm a psychologist. I thought, this has actually fallen out of the sky. Genuinely, this is God's work. Do you know what I mean? I was like, this is going to fix everything. Yeah, fell madly in love with her. And, you know, again, she was a real straight goer, you know, drugs and getting too pissed, even getting too pissed was not tolerable. Do you know what I mean? Which was good. And she was the first person that really pulled me up on my drinking and said, you know, it's not acceptable. It's not healthy. You need to think about what you're doing and all the rest of it. So, and obviously she helped me understand things that had been going on in my mind, you know, obviously having studied psychology and being a psychologist, and it was massively beneficial for me. And so that year in Barcelona, it was good, man. I certainly wasn't suicidal every day. Again, I wasn't perfect.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean? There were still these behaviours there. I was still massively anxious, way more than I should have been. And I did still have depressive moments, even being in that relationship with an amazing person. I did still have moments where suicidal thoughts would come back in. Yeah. You know, at no point throughout these years did they ever go totally. At no point, you know. But it was better. It was better than had been. Yeah. So yeah, mate, studied that course, and all went relatively well, apart from a few little blips, and then it was time for another change.
Yeah. So I mean, first and foremost, you know, I think it's important to recognise those people in your life as well. Yeah. Paolo obviously has entered into your life, and there's without a doubt you started to think maybe life is worth living, you know, and it is important to appreciate those people, because the most beautiful people in life, in my opinion, are the ones that do that without knowing that they're even doing it, you know. So, Paolo, if you're watching, big up, you know, you helped my mate out. So
100%.
But you've got to, like, and no matter where you end up in life, those interactions with people, those connections, whether that be a girlfriend, whether that be a friend, whether that be anybody, one thing I've certainly learned is to appreciate that every day, and appreciate those people. So yeah,
mate, 100%. And I'm glad you said that, actually. And mate, obviously we're not together right now as you know, as things stand, but she's an incredible person who you'll never hear me say a bad word about. She literally saved my life. You know, as I say, I went there with one last roll of the dice, and had I not met her, I don't think I would be sitting here today, genuinely. She helped me massively. She was a massive positive influence. She's an incredible person, and I'll forever be grateful for that. And she knows all that, you know.
Yeah, of course.
I've told her.
And just alluding to a couple of things you said, and I just want to ask you this, and at this point, it seems from what you've said, there was almost an acceptance, and that acceptance being that this is going to be a lifelong battle.
Yeah.
And I'm certain people will relate to that, where there is a moment in your life where you go, wow, this is actually me. Like, this is who I am. And as much as that is sad, the acceptance of knowing that this is not an easy fix. Like, you know, it's not an easy fix, but it's me. Like, and you talk about the me 5 years ago. You can talk about and think about that all you want. We're here now. Do you know what I mean? So was there a sense of that? Because I feel as if that's an important part of recovery, or part of the journey, that realization that I'm not well, but it's okay because I'm learning.
Mate, I think so. First of all, you're going to put me out of a job, man, because that is such a good question. That is such a good question. And it's actually, I'm realizing things sat here as you're saying that I've never actually thought about before. You know, why was I better in that period? By no means fixed. There were still some really shit things going on mentally, obviously, and it probably was that. It probably was, first of all, being with someone that told me, highlighted all of my bad behaviors and said, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to do to get better. We can do it. I'm going to help you through it, all the rest of it. And that gave me a basis to work from. and probably having that person in my ear telling me that there was a great person inside waiting to come out, and I just needed to do these things. So yeah, massively and it was acceptance. It was saying, okay, I realise mentally I'm in a shit state. I realise some of my behaviours are out of control and something does have to change. And we moved back to London, the both of us, after Barcelona. She came with me, and this is like just before COVID happened. We spent like 3 months living in a London flat, and then the pandemic happened. But I was fortunate enough to work for a company that paid for employees therapy, which obviously is an incredible benefit.
Amazing.
Yeah, and also again, credit to show up my ex. Like credit to but man, I think it's a nice thing, right? You don't often hear people say nice things about their exes, and I've only got nice things to say, so I'll say it until the cows come home. But she did pressure me to sort these things out, to go into therapy finally and work out what had gone on, you know. And so I did, because the company that I worked for paid for it. And I actually started therapy in, when was it, April of this year or May of this year. And weirdly enough, it coincided with when me and her actually broke up. You know, things happened, man. Life got in the way. She had to move back to Spain, couldn't see her because of the pandemic. And, you know, I won't get into that, you know, but things happened. And but I think I'd had one session with my therapist or something while I was still with her, and then the next week literally broke up. So she started me on that journey, and I don't think I would have done it if it was, you know, if it was just for me. And that's helped. Therapy has helped massively, you know, like absolutely massively. It's helped me, I don't know, put a name on certain things and behaviours. It's helped me again to further realise things I was doing wrong, things in the past that have affected me. Kind of, you know, loads of things that I spoke about in this podcast, like my mum getting sick and, you know, my world falling apart at the age of 16, and that later playing into anxiety because, you know, you're conditioned at that age to think anything can go wrong at any time, constantly being in trouble at school and, you know, waiting for punishment to happen, feeding into anxiety later on as well. And, but obviously it hasn't just been therapy. And I almost can't believe I skipped this, because about, how long would it have been before I started therapy? I don't know, like 6 months before. Obviously, I started this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's been a few things really that have, I would say, saved my life, got me into a point where I actually want to live now. I'm happy about living, you know, most of the time, which is not something that I could have said for probably, I'm 27 now, and I've been feeling this way now for probably, well, since I started the podcast. So I would have been, like 26 or whatever. You know, it's something that I couldn't have said for 6 years. I genuinely, for 6 years, obviously there were times being with Paula, which gave me the feeling of happiness, but it wasn't because I myself was, it was because I was with her, right?
Yeah.
But now I can honestly say, I mean, just the other day I was, you know, driving home or whatever, and I was sat there and I thought, if I was to be diagnosed with a non-curable disease right now, I'd probably be pretty fuming about it. Do you know what I mean? And and you know, people might think, yeah, obviously, but it wasn't like that for 6 years of my life. Do you know what I mean?
Almost wished.
Exactly. So yeah, things are in a much better place, and it's down to a few things that, you know, it's down to doing therapy. It's down to starting this podcast, mainly, I would say, even more so than therapy. And it's down to having had, you know, an incredible partner who I was with at that time. And also, obviously, you know, as the years went on, I started to become a lot more open to friends about, you know, my mental illness and all the rest of it, and also family, you know. And I'm so fortunate to have just the best circle in the world. Do you know what I mean? At least I feel, you know, loving, caring, supporting friends and family. That, and also, you know, I think they are probably what kept me going through all those shit years as well, you know. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here, I'm sure. So yeah, man, things are massively looking up now, and it's still a journey. I'm still perfectly capable of falling off, you know what I mean, falling off the rails again. But
and
yeah,
Westy, you probably will. You probably will. But it's you're at a point, and it's wonderful to hear you say the things that you've just said. And even just from talking to you now, I know that you'll have those coping mechanisms now. You'll be aware of the coping mechanisms now. If things don't go your way, you'll know that you can't do this and you can't do that, and you know that you need to speak to somebody, and you know the behaviours that will make you worse, and you know the behaviours that are going to make you better. So finally, I kind of want to, as we move on to the final part of this, and we can't not talk about COVID.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
You know, it's still in the news. What have we got now? What is it?
Was it Omicron?
Omicron.
Mate, it shows you how much sort of numbness I've got towards this reporting now that I don't even. Obviously I've got a rough idea, but I can't tell you the exact name. No.
Yeah. But we actually, so we spoke during lockdown, and we talked about mental illness for people suffering mental illness during the pandemic. We shared some views actually that we both benefited massively from the world slowing down just a little bit, you know, the world slowing down and for people to realise, you know. Do you still hold that view?
Man, 100%. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. And again, sorry if listeners are finding me a bit all over the place, but this is the first time I've done this, and there's a lot to put into order and all the rest of it. And when you're, you know, have been in the mental state that I've been in, the memories don't always fall into order as they should. But that is something that I should have mentioned when I was talking a minute ago. To some extent, and this sounds mental, and again, I almost feel bad for saying it because I know how bad the pandemic has been for a lot of people. Okay, I understand that, but I can only say my reality and my truth, and my truth is that that's also played a massive part in, you know, in my salvation, if you like. Do you know what I mean? Because it took away the option of all of those negative behaviours of going out and getting smashed and all the rest. It just took that away overnight, gone, because everywhere was closed. And I moved back with my parents in the countryside, and I was living with my partner as well. So it was massively, and that was the first time that I'd come out of that hamster wheel of weekend offending, binges, work, doing things you don't like, rinse, repeat. It's the first time I'd come out of that cycle, and I thought, fucking hell, like I actually feel really good like this. You know, some feelings of anxiety have subsided massively. You know, depressive feelings have subsided massively. So yeah, as bad as it might sound, for me, it has been incredibly positive, and that's just the only way I can say it, really.
Awesome. And yeah, I know there'll be, as you said, actually, there's going to be people, and you can only speak your truths. And I believe that lockdown probably was beneficial to a lot of people that may have been suffering, whether that's anxiety because of work, whether that's anxiety because of life. Life happens, man. Life happens quickly, and a lot of shit things happen in life. But when, as you said, everything slows down. I mean, it was amazing seeing the news. Like, it was almost like Mother Nature was saying, no, fuck you lot. I want some clearer oceans again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and you see the satellite images over China, and it's like there's no smog.
Yeah.
And I like to think that there was something that went, you know, let's just sit this human race down for a brief while, and they can all sort of take some time and think. But no, it's amazing to be sat opposite you, really, and hearing what you've just said, and to hear that the progression that you've made. For quite an incredible story that a lot of people are going to relate to, and
I hope so, man. Yeah,
and it's the whole reason you're here, and I've got a mic in front of me. Do you know what I mean? And this massive light, and like this, and doing this with, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, with you, and to see the growth of this, the platform that you've created, and for people now to know the reason why you did it. It is special. So at what point, I suppose, before we draw this to a close, at what point did Back on Track become your focus? Yeah,
man. So it's I got furloughed from my job back in May of last year, May and June. So I had nothing to do, and I don't know why, but the idea of a podcast just came up, and instantly when I thought, what can I talk about with passion and whatever else and personal experience? And it was a no-brainer. Do you know what I mean? The idea of going off the rails and getting things back together, talking about mental health, mental illness, and all the other topics, all other kinds of adversity, was a no-brainer because it had been my life for 7 years or whatever. And so, yeah, I was massively passionate about it. But when you've got anxiety, the idea of starting a podcast is pretty daunting, right? So I was toing and froing for a while about it, whether I was actually going to be able to go through with it. And again, it was being with Paola that gave me the confidence to do it. And I mean, if you look back at some of the old stuff that I put out there,
man, I was one of the first, I think, weren't I?
You were, man, and like
I bet you watched that recently and went, "Fuck,
mate." I haven't watched back any of the early stuff because I can't. I used to have chronic anxiety before every single interview, literally to the point where my mind would be white. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't be able to. You'd be talking, and I wouldn't be taking in what you're saying, and it was difficult. But yeah, it was a no-brainer to start, and it has massively changed my life for the better for so many reasons. Number one, because I feel like at times I'm doing something that's useful and meaningful. So it fills that purpose, I feel like I finally have a concrete purpose through something I created. And that gives me a reason to want to live, man. Do you know what I mean? Literally gives me a reason to want to live. And also not to mention the fact that I was juggling it with a job for a long period of time, which meant that I had to do stuff at weekends, which meant that, I couldn't go out and engage in negative behaviors. And I had one blip, even while doing this podcast, of a couple of months after that breakup, where I didn't release much for like 3 months, and I got in a pretty negative mental state again. But again, that shows you how important this is to keeping me above water, massively important. And yeah, man, I mean, we'll see where it goes. But at the moment, I can't imagine not doing it because I dread to think where I'd be without it.
Of course. And finally, mate, like you make all of us lot do.
Yeah.
I love his powerful, man.
Do you?
Well, yeah.
Mate, by the way, just before we get into this, you've absolutely smashed it.
Have I?
For a first time, mate, I was so much worse than you the first time I did this. It is untrue. You've been totally relaxed. The questions have been unreal. You've dealt with me kind of scattergunning all over the place. Mate, maybe
it's the 10 diazepam. I'm joking, bro. I'm joking.
Yeah. 50 milligrams.
Thank you, mate. No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm clueless. Really am clueless as to what I'm doing. I just wanted to at least give it a good shot.
Mate, you smashed it.
For you, more than anything. But yeah, tell the people listening some free bits of advice that you would give to people suffering with whatever they're going through in life, man. Take it away.
Yeah, man. So I think the first one is a no-brainer, and it goes back to what I was literally just saying, and that is find your passion. Now, that passion, it doesn't have to be a job that pays you money. Yeah, it can be a hobby that you do outside of your job, but you need something in your life that you get fulfillment from. For me, you have to have that, because if you don't have fulfillment in your life, you start going down the path I went down when I didn't, right? So, if you have like sort of, that frustrated hobby that you've always wanted to do, but you've never done, or whatever it might be, or, moving to a different place, or, or going for that job that you've always debated, should you go for it, pays less, but, you're going to get more fulfillment out of it. Do it. 100% do it. Because it is worth so much more than just being on the hamster wheel and ended up in the place that I did. So find your passion, whether it's a hobby or whatever it is. That's massive. Also, a second one that I'd say is just take care of yourself, because as you probably guessed from the way I told this story, that's not something that I was doing a lot of the time. Yeah. And it's something that I have to do nowadays. Yes, I'm in a better place now, but if I don't exercise at all, and if I go out and smash it, and I'm not sleeping well, I'm not eating all of these things, I feel horrific. For me, these are fundamental pillars of my life now that have to be in place. I have to exercise a couple of times a week. Yeah. I have to sleep well, and I can't take it too far at the weekends. They're non-negotiables. And if any of those slip, everything goes to shit again. So, put healthy habits in your life and take care of yourself. That would be another one. And also the final one that I would say is don't be afraid to reach out for professional help. Yeah, because that's something that I put off until this year, you know, nearly 7 years or whatever of going through what I went through, until I finally decided enough's enough, I better look at it. And it has been massively helpful. So there shouldn't be any stigma attached to that. And I believe everyone can benefit from seeing a therapist. You don't have to be suffering from mental illness to benefit from seeing a therapist. So yeah, it'd be find your purpose, cement healthy habits in your life that make you feel good. And also, if you are struggling, just make that phone call. You can get it free on the NHS. You know what I mean? Like there are places and support groups and so much stuff out there. And if that feels too far away in the beginning, then start with some close friends or family or whoever it might be. So yeah, man, there'd be my 3 things.
Awesome, bro.
Cheers, mate.
It's been a pleasure.
You smashed it, mate. Genuinely, you smashed it. Mate, listen, mate. Just before we sign off, thank you so much for taking on this task, because, yeah, it's not an easy task, man. And it's
yeah. Oh, don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Yeah, I think sometimes people listen to it and they just think, you're essentially just having a chat or whatever else. But, you've got your questions, you've got your preparation, you're dealing with intimate topics and emotional moments. And, mate, you smashed it and you made me feel comfortable going through all of it. And obviously, as you know, I was feeling well nervous before, but I felt comfortable doing it with you. You smashed it, man. So, yeah, thank you, bro.
We'll have to wait to see, bro.
Yeah.
We'll come out and be like, fuck.
It won't. But yeah, cheers, bro.
No worries, mate.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you liked it or found it useful. If you did, make sure you hit subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and also that way it makes sure that you never miss an episode. If you've got a story you want to share on the Back on Track podcast, get in touch, give me a shout. I'd love to hear from you via backontrackpod@gmail.com.